You pick up the phone. You say hello. And there is nothing. Silence. Maybe a slight hiss of background noise. Maybe what sounds like distant voices in a call center. Maybe a faint click as if something connected and then stopped. And then you hang up thinking it was a wrong number, a dropped call, or one of those annoying robocalls that nobody has time for. You have had this experience dozens of times. You thought nothing of it. You went back to your coffee, back to your television, back to whatever you were doing before the phone rang. And here is what you did not know was happening on the other end of that call while you were setting the phone back down on the table. You were being evaluated. The silence was not an accident. The silence was the point. You were not talking to a machine that misdirected its call. You were talking to a system that was specifically designed to listen to you say hello, analyze the characteristics of your voice, and decide whether you are a viable target for a fraud operation that will contact you again in the coming days, weeks, or months, and that will cost you, if it succeeds, between $5,000 and $200,000 or more, depending on which specific fraud operation purchased the information gathered from that single moment of silence. This is not a rumor. This is not a theory passed around in online forums. This is a documented, operational, and expanding fraud infrastructure that the Federal Trade Commission, the FBI, and the AARP Fraud Watch Network have been tracking since 2022, and that has accelerated dramatically in 2026 with the widespread deployment of AI voice analysis tools that are now cheap enough for mid-level criminal organizations to acquire and use routinely. And the specific population most targeted by this infrastructure, the population for whom this operation generates the highest conversion rate, meaning the highest rate of successful financial theft per targeted person, is Americans over the age of 60. I'm going to spend the next several minutes explaining to you exactly how this works because the mechanics of it are both more sophisticated and more simple than you might expect. I'm going to tell you what happens after that silent call. I'm going to tell you who is calling and why. I'm going to tell you what specific things you say in a normal phone greeting that are being evaluated and why those things matter to a fraud operation. I'm going to tell you the 6 specific scams that use silent call reconnaissance as their opening move, including one that has generated more losses among Americans over 60 in the past 18 months than any other fraud scheme currently operating in the United States. And I am going to give you the exact things to do differently, starting this week, that make you dramatically less useful as a target, so that the system evaluating you during that moment of silence decides you are not worth pursuing and moves on. Stay with me to the very end because the most important piece of information in this video, the specific thing you say when you pick up the phone that signals to these systems that you are a high-value target, is something almost no one has been told. And once you know it, you will never answer your phone the same way again. Let me start with the mechanism itself, because understanding how it works is what gives you the power to protect yourself from it. Criminal fraud operations at scale face a fundamental economic problem. They have access to enormous lists of phone numbers, purchased from data brokers, scraped from public records, obtained through data breaches, or simply generated algorithmically from area codes and prefixes that correspond to geographic areas with high concentrations of retirees. But not every phone number on those lists is equally valuable. Some numbers belong to people who are alert, skeptical, financially savvy, and hard to deceive. Others belong to people who are more susceptible to manipulation, for a variety of reasons including age, isolation, cognitive decline, grief, loneliness, or simply a lifetime of trusting the people who contact them because they grew up in an era when phone calls came from people you knew. The problem for the fraud operation is that they cannot tell which is which just by looking at a phone number. So they developed a way to find out. They call, they say nothing, and they listen. What they are listening for is not complicated to describe, but it is remarkably effective in practice. They are analyzing the voice that answers the phone for a specific set of characteristics that correlate, in the data they have assembled over years of operating these schemes, with higher susceptibility to the specific fraud approaches they use. The first thing they analyze is your age range. Elderly voices have acoustic characteristics that differ measurably from younger voices, including changes in pitch, resonance, speech rate, and vocal tremor. The AI systems doing this analysis have been trained on large data sets and can categorize a voice into a rough age bracket within 2 or 3 seconds of hearing you say hello. If your voice falls into the 65 and older bracket, a flag goes up. You move to the next level of evaluation. The second thing they analyze is your greeting pattern. This is the specific one I want you to hear clearly because it is actionable information you can use immediately. The phrase that generates the highest value signal in these systems is any variation of the phrase yes. If you pick up the phone and your first word is yes, you are registering as a high-value target in ways that go beyond simple voice analysis. Here is why, and this is where the scam gets genuinely clever. Several of the fraud operations that use silent call reconnaissance as their opening move are specifically building what are called voice authorization databases. These databases store recordings of the moment you said yes, which they will later use to create fraudulent voice authorizations for financial transactions. When a bank or a financial services company calls a customer to verify a large transaction, they sometimes use a voice authorization system that asks the caller to say yes to confirm. A criminal organization that has a recording of your voice saying yes can use that recording to impersonate your voice authorization in those systems. The one moment of innocent, instinctive politeness when you pick up the phone and say, "Yes, this is she," or "Yes, who is this?" or "Yes, hello," has just provided a fraud operation with an audio sample they can weaponize. The third thing they analyze is your tone. Are you impatient? Are you guarded? Do you sound like someone who deals briskly with unknown callers and hangs up quickly? Or do you sound patient, polite, and willing to engage? Patience and willingness to engage are extraordinarily valuable to a fraud operation because they indicate a higher likelihood that you will listen to a longer pitch, stay on the phone through a more elaborate story, and ultimately be persuaded by social pressure, authority claims, or emotional manipulation. A voice that sounds warm, accommodating, and unhurried is worth considerably more to a fraud operation than one that sounds immediately suspicious. Now let me explain what happens after the silent call, because the call itself is just the beginning of a process that may take weeks to unfold before you see the consequences of it. When the silent call system evaluates your voice and determines that you fall into the high-value target category, your phone number is flagged and tagged with whatever profile information was gathered during the call, including estimated age, greeting pattern, tone classification, and any identifying information that was already associated with your phone number in the purchase data lists. Your number is then moved from the general list to what these operations call the warm list. The warm list is the one that gets worked by human callers, not automated systems. Real people, sometimes operating from call centers in countries with low labor costs, are assigned to the warm list and given detailed scripts for specific fraud approaches that have been shown to work most effectively with the demographic profile your number was assigned. The call you receive from a human on the warm list may come days, weeks, or even months after the original silent call, and when it comes, it will not feel like a cold call from a stranger. It will feel like a continuation of a relationship that you have no memory of starting. The caller will often reference something specific about your situation, drawn from the data profile associated with your number. They may know your approximate age range. They may know your geographic area. They may know that you are likely retired. They may know that you were widowed recently based on public death records that were cross-referenced with your address. All of this information will be deployed in the first 60 seconds of the call to create the impression that this person knows something about you, which establishes a false sense of familiarity and credibility that makes everything they say afterward more persuasive. Let me now go through the 6 specific fraud schemes that use silent call reconnaissance as their opening move, because knowing the specific shape of each one is your best protection against being caught by any of them. The first and currently most active is the grandchild in crisis scam, which has generated more reported losses among Americans over 60 in the past 18 months than any other phone-based fraud scheme in the country. The setup is a call from someone claiming to be your grandchild, in trouble, needing money urgently, and asking you not to tell their parents because they are ashamed or afraid of getting in trouble. The caller uses emotional desperation and urgency to prevent you from stopping to verify anything. The silent call reconnaissance version of this scam is particularly effective because the caller has been told from your voice profile that you are likely in the target age range for grandparent targeting, and they have enough confidence in the profile to make the call in the first place. The average loss in a completed grandchild crisis scam is between $4,000 and $40,000, with some victims losing significantly more when a second or third call follows the first. The second scheme is the Medicare and Social Security impersonation scam. The caller claims to be from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, from the Social Security Administration, or from a Medicare supplemental insurance provider, and they tell you there is a problem with your benefits, your payments, or your account that requires immediate verification of your personal information or immediate payment to avoid suspension of your coverage. The voice reconnaissance version of this scam uses the yes greeting you provided to attempt to pass voice authorization checks within Medicare contractor systems. The caller who contacts you has been told your likely age range from the voice analysis, which makes you a plausible Medicare beneficiary, and they will use that demographic information to make their story sound specific and credible. The third scheme is the bank impersonation scam. The caller claims to be from your bank's fraud department and tells you that there has been suspicious activity on your account requiring immediate action. They create urgency by telling you that money is being stolen from your account right now and that you need to provide your PIN, your online banking password, or a verification code to stop the theft. In some versions, they tell you to withdraw cash and hand it to an agent they will send to your home. The voice, yes, you provided at the silent call stage is used in some versions to attempt to defeat bank voice authentication systems. The age profile from voice analysis tells the operation that you are likely to have a significant account balance, which makes you a higher value target worth assigning to an experienced caller. The fourth scheme is the IRS and tax authority impersonation scam. The caller claims you owe back taxes, and that law enforcement will arrest you within hours if you do not pay immediately. They often tell you that they are calling as a courtesy before enforcement action, and that payment via gift cards, wire transfer, or cryptocurrency will prevent your arrest. The silence to activation pipeline for this scam uses your voice profile's age range to identify you as a likely retiree who may have more anxiety about interactions with government authority, which is a psychological vulnerability this scam specifically exploits. The fifth scheme is the lottery and prize notification scam. The caller tells you that you have won a significant prize, often hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that you must pay a processing fee, a tax withholding amount, or an insurance payment before the prize can be released to you. The voice yes from the silent call stage is used in some versions to create a fictitious record of you having entered a contest and consenting to its terms. The age profile from voice analysis is used to identify you as a more likely candidate for this particular approach, based on data the operation has assembled about which demographics respond most frequently to prize and lottery scams. The sixth scheme is the romance and companionship scam, which deserves specific attention because it is among the most psychologically devastating and financially destructive scams currently operating, and because its connection to silent call reconnaissance is less obvious than the others. In this scam, initial contact is sometimes made not by phone, but through a social media platform or a dating application. The silent call reconnaissance provides initial profile data, including age range and personality tone, that helps the operation identify which numbers likely belong to older adults who are potentially isolated, which is the primary psychological precondition for a successful romance scam. The operation does not necessarily call you back directly. Instead, it may use your phone number to locate your social media profile, where it then initiates contact through a fabricated persona. The financial losses in completed romance scams routinely exceed $100,000 per victim, and in some documented cases have exceeded $500,000. Now let me give you the specific protective actions that make you dramatically less useful as a reconnaissance target and much harder to successfully approach with any of these 6 schemes. The single most important change you can make is to change your phone greeting. Stop answering with yes as your first word. Instead, answer with a neutral, non-committal greeting that does not provide an audio sample of you saying yes in a clear, confirmatory tone. The phrase hello, or the phrase who is calling please, or simply the phrase I am listening, all accomplish the same interpersonal function of acknowledging the call without providing the specific vocal sample that voice authorization fraud specifically requires. This is a small change, it takes no practice, and it eliminates one of the most specific vulnerabilities that the silent call reconnaissance system is designed to exploit. The second protective action is to let unknown numbers go to voicemail. If you do not recognize the number that is calling, do not answer. Let the call go to voicemail. If it is a real person with a legitimate reason to speak with you, they will leave a message. If it is a silent call reconnaissance system, it will hang up without leaving one, which protects you entirely from the voice analysis. People who were important to your life before the phone rang will call back or leave a message. Criminals operating a voice analysis system will not. The third protective action is to register your phone number with the National Do Not Call Registry at donotcall.gov. Legitimate telemarketers are legally required to honor this registry. The registration does not stop criminal operations which ignore the law, but it does reduce the volume of borderline calls you receive from gray area operations, which reduces your overall exposure to the reconnaissance pipeline. The fourth protective action is to use the spam and scam call blocking features built into your smartphone. Both iPhone and Android devices have settings that allow you to silence calls from numbers that are not in your contacts. Your phone carrier, including AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and most major carriers, also offers free or low-cost call screening services that can significantly reduce the number of suspicious calls that reach you. These tools are not perfect, but they create real friction for the operations running voice reconnaissance systems, and friction is a meaningful protection. The fifth protective action is to talk to the people closest to you about what you have learned from this video. This is genuinely important, not just for yourself, but because elder fraud is dramatically underreported, and the people most likely to help someone who has been targeted are the family members and close friends who are in regular contact with them. If your children, your grandchildren, your close friends know that you now understand the silent call system and how it works, they will be better positioned to recognize the warning signs if you mention a call you received from someone you did not know, or if you begin describing an interaction that sounds like one of the 6 scams I described. In documented fraud cases, family members who had been told about the mechanics of these scams were far more likely to intervene successfully before money was lost. The sixth protective action is to never provide personal information to any caller who contacts you. This seems obvious, but the way it breaks down in practice is less obvious than it sounds. The information most commonly extracted by fraud callers is not the kind of information you think of as sensitive. It is not your social security number or your bank account number, at least not in the opening calls. It is the kind of confirming information that seems harmless to provide. Your date of birth, your middle name, your mother's maiden name, the street you grew up on. These are the answers to security questions that protect your financial accounts. When a caller with a plausible story asks for this information in the context of verifying your identity or checking your eligibility for something, providing it feels natural and unharmful. It is not. It is the information that allows a subsequent fraudulent call or a fraudulent online access attempt to successfully impersonate you in a system that asks for exactly these details. The seventh protective action is specific to the grandchild crisis scam, which I described as the highest loss scheme currently operating, and which has a specific countermeasure that works better than anything else. Establish a family verification code. Agree in advance with your adult children and grandchildren on a specific word or phrase that only your real family members would know. If you ever receive a distressing call from someone claiming to be a grandchild in crisis, tell the caller, "Before I do anything, I need to hear our family word." If the caller cannot provide it, you know immediately that you are talking to a criminal and not to your grandchild. This one preparation takes 3 minutes to set up and has stopped hundreds of grandchild scam attempts in families that implemented it. Let me close by bringing you back to that moment at the beginning of this video. The phone rings, you pick it up, you say hello, there is silence. Now you know that silence is not random. Now you know what is happening on the other end of that call while you wait to find out who is there. Now you know what that first word you spoke was analyzed for, and what the operational consequences of that analysis might be in the weeks and months ahead. The people who run these operations count on one thing more than anything else. They count on the fact that you did not know how they worked, that you thought the silent call was a glitch and put the phone down without thinking about it again, that you would answer the next call from someone you did not recognize the same way you always have, because you had no reason to do anything differently. You have a reason now. Change your greeting. Let unknown calls go to voicemail. Use your carrier's call blocking features. Establish a family verification code. Talk to the people who love you about what you have learned. And remember that the single most powerful protection you have is not any technology or any government program. It is the knowledge of how these operations work and the specific behavior changes that make you not worth pursuing. Share this with every person you know who is over 60. Share it with every person you know who answers the phone the way most of us were taught to answer the phone. Warmly, immediately, with an open yes. Because that yes may be the most expensive word they ever say. And now you know exactly why.